Welcome to Water Polo New South Wales Coffee Club Conversation 4. This initiative is designed to support and inspire coaches by providing a forum to connect, share, and discuss their coaching experiences and to assist in developing their coaching journeys. Tonight, the session will be hosted by Dr. Damien Taylor, and we are pleased to be inviting our two Stingers coaches tonight, head coach Bec Rippon and assistant coach Eddie Dennis. Eddie and Bec led the Stingers to the silver medal at the Paris Olympics, and that's a team that Bec was appointed to as head coach for the Paris 24 Olympics. She has been an assistant coach with the Stingers since 2017 and was also an Olympian on 2 occasions in Athens and also in Beijing, where she secured the bronze medal as an athlete at those games. Eddie's been a Stingers assistant coach for a number of years over a long period of time and was the assistant coach in Paris for where they secured the silver medal. He's also been a junior national team coach and has also been the Adelaide Jets National League head coach when they were playing in the National League. So I welcome you all tonight, and we'll hand over to Damien to host the session. At any time, make sure you post your questions on the chat room, and I will ask those questions at an appropriate time during the session. So welcome, Damien, and enjoy the session.
Thanks very much, Glenn. Thanks very much, Bec and Eddie. Really appreciate it. It's an absolute honour to have you on. So I know you've been tied up in camp for a lot of the time, so making the time to help us out and the community in general is much appreciated. So thank you. Bec, might start with you. It's really important to understand how your journey in the sport started and that ecosystem around it. So if we can just briefly touch into how did you get involved in the sport as an athlete?
I actually started water polo just through school. I had a swimming background. My family was living in southwest Sydney, and we had a backyard pool. And my parents knew that we needed. My parents didn't swim, so they knew we needed.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay, that's
yeah.
interesting.
My mum's background's Lebanese. They never learnt to swim,
Oh, wow.
and my dad came from athletics, so swimming was definitely not a strength in our family. But they decided to throw us into swimming lessons and swim squad. I think there were 4 kids under 5.5, so they went, you can go swim training because you can all go there and do that and keep you out of
Okay.
trouble. So
Yeah.
um, through that, we obviously got stronger at swimming. And then when we were in high school, my 2 older brothers, they got involved at the local school where there just happened to be, I suppose, like a local competition with the local schools, but also they had a few people at that school who were really passionate about water polo, and I think that's kind of where it all started. So by the time I turned up to high school, they had already decided that I was going to play because I had brothers who played and
All
because I had
right.
a
Yeah.
swimming
Okay.
background. And
That was the natural evolution.
yeah, so it was
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
like one of those things. I did it
Yeah.
because my brothers did it, and because I had a good swimming background at the time, I had a feel for it, and then I'd played a number of team sports growing up. So I think it was
I
just
was
one.
going to ask that one. Were you
Yeah.
involved in other teams, say netball or things like
Played
that?
a little bit of netball.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I just did a bit of everything. My mum
Okay.
and
Yeah.
dad just kind of went, go and try a bunch of things. I
Yeah.
did play netball. I was always standing beside for contact. So it wasn't really, I wasn't that great at it, but it was fun. And I think, again, that game, team sport, game awareness came. My dad was a soccer coach. That's probably the biggest influence in
Okay.
terms of team sport. So I
Yeah.
grew up spending many nights and weekends just at the football. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of where I watched sport, and that's the sport that I watched. And I still see water polo in a similar way, not the same, but I think I learned a
Yeah.
lot of the I suppose it's an invasion sport, looking at how to create space and how
Yeah.
to find advantage and things like that. So I think that's just where it started, and then I had fun with it, and yeah, got a few opportunities along the way, and that's where it
Fantastic. Yeah.
headed.
Well,
Yeah,
swimming's it's a very lonely sport in some ways, just following a black line. Yeah, and
yeah.
you can either get really gifted or not. So that was that social aspect attractive for you as well to be involved in the team. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was really interesting. I kept swimming as I played because I really enjoyed the downtime from the team sports amazing, but I'm a bit of an introvert, and so I think the team dynamic was a lot and I loved it, but I
Yeah.
needed the swimming where you just put your head down and got away, and that was my own time and space. But the other thing for me, our swim squad was a really competitive squad, but they made it social as well. So I felt like my swim squad was a team sport, even
Yeah.
though it was an individual sport. So I loved the team dynamic of that, or the squad dynamic of
Yeah.
swimming. I loved the team part, but the good thing about swimming was head down, and then you go to water polo, and it was,
Yeah. So there was a fun and the discipline aspect,
yeah,
yeah, as well.
a nice
Eddie,
mix of
oh,
everything.
sorry, Beck, go on. Yeah.
I was just saying it was like a nice mix of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with just before I jump over there, was the discipline um, uh, really evident when you first started, or was more around that fun and understanding the basics of the game? What really stood out to you at the start of the coaching that attracted you to keep coming back to play?
Um, I think like it was just something at school to do that was different.
Yep.
And my dad and my mum were really insistent on if you start something, you finish it. So I started it. And so
Okay.
once I started, I was never able mid-season to make a decision to change or leave it. And
Yeah.
if I was doing it, then I was going to commit properly to it. So I guess we were quite disciplined in that area. It was like you will do all the parts that go with it, and it's
Yeah.
still fun. And I think there was just this combination of both. I think I really loved it, but it was also a commitment that I said I was going to do. So then it was kind of enforced by my parents that you just continue that, and when you are ready to change, that you do that, but you don't do it mid-season.
And
You
we'll bring that back into your coaching later on. Commitment,
Okay.
dedication, and resilience to actually stick it out is something that you've done. That's awesome. Eddie, if we can jump into your journey into the pool as an athlete, how did you get involved?
I was probably exactly opposite to Beck's introduction. I mean, I ended up being a goalkeeper, so um, I really came to the sport. I loved any kind of activity. Like when I was in primary school and through to high school, I had a little bit of school AFL because I grew up in Melbourne,
Yeah.
and loved watching the games. Like loved watching any Australian teams play. Went out and watched soccer games with my dad on the weekend, and um, really had a real passion for it, but never really got great opportunity. It was always I was working in my parents' shop at an early age and sort of didn't have a lot of sporting club opportunities until I kind of went to high school.
Yeah.
And when I went, I changed schools at year 9. I went to a school called Melbourne High in Melbourne. And from what I can remember, I don't know if this is true or not, I reckon the first thing we did in PE was water polo.
Really?
And the year before had been the LA Games, and Australian men finished fourth. I think it was fourth. Um, most all the what do they call them? The Eastern Bloc countries were banned for that Olympics, and so it gave a lot more opportunity for other teams from around the world. So Australia got a great result. They got good coverage, and my parents are both Croatian, and so there was discussion about water polo as a Croatian sport, and et cetera, et cetera. And so went to school. And the first thing we did was PE, and jumped in and had done very little swimming.
Oh, right. So
Um,
you weren't, yeah, weren't, so
we
weren't,
had no. I just wanted to give it a go. We did this simple test at the end of like a 6-week block of trying to learn the sport, and the guy said, the PE teacher said, "Oh, you've done pretty well. You should try out for the Year 9 team." I kind of went, "Oh, okay, that sounds pretty good." And so I went along and with a few of my mates, and they kind of saw how I swam, and they went, "Well, you can go in goals." And it just so happened
you
that
could tread water well.
one end of the pool was shallow, and I was reasonably tall. I was already probably over 6 foot at that age,
Yeah.
and long arms, and didn't mind getting behind the ball. So at the shallow end, you had a bigger goal. Like it was probably twice as big as a normal water polo goal because I could stand up to my knees in water,
Yeah.
right? So I could jump all over the place. And so when we played games, I would save everything at the shallow end. And then at the deep end, I was literally holding onto the goals, hoping no one would throw the ball at me. And after the end of that first season, I kind of, went off and did other school sport, whatever. And then when the new season was coming, I kind of went, I actually want to learn how to kick my legs better. I want to learn how to tread water better. I want to learn how to be. So I actually started just going to school, getting to school at 7 o'clock when the pool opened at school, and I'd be there knocking on the door, and at least 2 days a week, sometimes 3. So this was in what would it be, year 10. I would be there and be doing an hour before school, just practicing my kick. And then the PE teacher kind of saw me in the distance one morning, and he said, "Was that you down the end there practicing?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, your kick's getting pretty good." And I said, "Oh, thank you." And then we just went piece by piece. So really different introduction. But I suppose the question about what keeps you coming back, it was I just found it really challenging.
Yeah.
Different, challenging, kind of engaging in that sense that you had to keep working, but each bit of work you did, you could see output from that. And
Yeah.
as a goalkeeper, you get lots of feedback. At the beginning, probably a lot of bad because a lot of balls are going in.
Yeah.
But you get lots of feedback in terms of how well you're progressing. And that just, I don't know, just kept me coming back. And even to this day, I can't say I'm a water person at all, but I loved the sport for the challenge that it gave me and the fact that I was kind of going, okay, right from the beginning, I was getting good feedback in terms of you're okay at this, like you should maybe keep trying, and just getting encouragement all the way through.
That really interesting. Two things that stand out from both of you is doing the extra things that you were self-motivated to and dedicated to get better internally. But what would stand out? Are they things that stand out initially that positive feedback and reinforcement? Yes, they were telling you how to improve. The feedback was you need to get better in certain areas, but was that something that you look back on that kept drawing you back, that you were getting good, solid feedback, but positive reinforcement of continual improvement?
Look, I'd say 100%. Like as I said, from at every level, at every step along the way, I was getting that kind of positive feedback, whether it was just because I was tall and long, or whether I was getting better at something, or they could see some improvement, or I was working harder than other people. And even when I was lucky enough, when I walked into a club program, it was actually the best senior men's club program in Australia at the time. It was filled with Australian senior players, many of who had played in LA, and they were so encouraging. I remember going at one stage to one of them saying, "Oh, I don't know, I feel like I'm not the right size to be a goalkeeper," and they just went, "You just keep at it, boy. Like you're going well." And just constant encouragement was amazing, and then opportunity as well. You need that opportunity to
Of
get to
course.
where me
Yeah.
and Bec both got to, but.
Yeah.
That encouragement certainly kept me, wanting to work harder and get better at what I was doing.
Fantastic. Bec, if we look at your leadership as an athlete, did you evolve in your leadership? Were you good at using your voice initially, or was it something that they helped you with and encouraged you, and some maturity helped with that?
I think I was probably someone who just led by example in how I trained at first. I mean, this is
Actions speak the loudest at that
Yeah,
stage.
this was years down the track. If I think back to when I was really young, I was the one trying to get kicked out of training. So that's it's a bit different. But I think, once I decided this is kind of what I want to do, I definitely was someone who wanted to lead by example because I never saw myself as a leader. I just learnt to work hard, and if you work hard, opportunities might present, and then if they
Yeah.
present, kind of what happens there is up to you. And so I think just that's how we were kind of raised. And so every training, it was kind of do your best, absolutely have a go. We got, lots of feedback along the way. Some of it, like swimming, is very black and white because a time can be feedback or,
Yeah. Yeah.
a poor performance can be feedback. But you also had a really strong coach and an environment that gave constant feedback. But in water polo, it's a little bit different. So, you're looking for technical, tactical, but I think the one thing I could do was definitely, lead by example. I felt that in my age group, once I realized, I don't think I saw myself as a leader, but once
Yeah.
I made some teams and I was in the same kind of age group, I think I just started to, again, you start to become a leader, maybe by
Yeah.
whether it's again demonstrating certain things or being made a leader without really realizing what that took. And I think at a young age, it was really about the, the prestige that went with it more than
Absolutely.
actually knowing how to deal with any of those things.
Were you hard on yourself as that leader to be doing the extra things and to be early and to be looked to be working harder, or if not the hardest out of any? Were you really hard in that space on yourself,
I
particularly as you progressed?
Yeah, I think at a junior level, that was just who I was
Yeah.
naturally, was to work hard and but also I was having fun, and I don't think I really knew what that real leadership looked like. It was probably more help the coach out in any way,
Yep.
and try and get the team together for certain things. But as I stepped into a senior team, I became not the youngest, or one of the youngest or least experienced. So I didn't see myself as a
At what
leader.
age was that? Sorry, Beck, to interrupt you.
I wasn't that young. I was in my early 20s,
Yeah.
but I still came in, I guess, as the least experienced when you
Yeah.
first step in. So I don't think I saw myself as a leader in any way. And it took a few years to kind of find my feet, where I actually felt like, one, I fit in the team and that I was
Yeah.
contributing. At the beginning, it was just a bit of survival and trying to be safe and to do all these things that probably, if I could do it again, I would do really differently. I would try and go in and, really try and make an impact and show. I was trying to show my best, but I was, you're nervous
Yeah.
and things. So I think it took some conversations at times where it was really about, you're going to need to do something here to earn your spot, keep your spot. And that was a shift in mindset for me as a player. And so then as a player, my game evolved. And I think with that, once you get that confidence and you start to play a certain way,
Yeah.
my position in the pool also came with a bit of a leadership, a game playmaker type position. So naturally, some of those things started to evolve. I don't know that I ever had formal training, and I don't know that I was ever excellent at leadership in
Yeah.
the game. I think again, it was probably trying to do what I thought I knew and working with the players that we had. Um,
It's just interesting to see how you evolve, and this is
yeah,
not a trick question because you were coached by Eddie, so
yeah, no, no,
it's
no.
not. I'm
It's
not
not.
sure if
I don't
people
feel
know,
like.
but yeah,
I just don't feel like I really
yeah,
saw myself as a leader until
yeah. But
most recently, to be
what
honest.
would you take out of key things that you brought into your early coaching? What was it? Feedback? Were there particular values that really stood out to you? You're a hard worker, so that's going to come in when we talk about your coaching. But was there a few things that you took out? Was one the feedback and the standards that were expected?
I started coaching a really young group. That's where I started. And I think as a young coach, my first thing was, I just want everyone to love it. I want everyone to
Yeah.
love it, and I want everyone to love me. And I realized pretty quickly it's not really what's going to happen. So you start to
Who did you start coaching? Just in the
um I mean, I did some swim coaching as I was growing up, and I
yeah.
coached some local school
Because I
teams. But
wanted
I'd
to
say
understand how
probably
you
my
got into
first
coaching. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say my first real, once I finished playing, my first step into coaching was at Cronulla, and I was given like a development program. So they were between 13 and 16.
Did they seek you or you sought out coaching?
I was approached by the coach that was leading Cronulla at the time. I had just finished playing, and I
Had
had
you
stepped
thought of
away
coaching?
from it. Look, I'd never seen it as a career because there weren't many coaching roles in Australia. I loved it, and I always did it because I did it growing up as a swimming coach. Like, I just loved training people. I was a PT for a bit. So I think I loved coaching. And I had I suppose, a little dream of one day being the N-Swiss coach, because that was when I was growing up. That was one of the coaches that had the biggest impact on me. So
Yeah.
I thought of that as like the dream role, but I don't really thought it would happen.
But
So
that shoulder tap helped you get
100%.
involved. And
Yes.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
really interesting thing out of all the conversation research I have that a lot of coaches, female coaches, hadn't thought about coaching, but were approached and, oh yeah, okay, I'll give it a go. So it is an important step to encourage more coaches to get into it that way. And
Yeah,
one
I think I was
question
ready
before I
to
jump
get
over to
done.
Eddie, what were your expectations first time going on pool deck to what was the reality of where
I don't know what expectations I had. I think in
we
my
prepared
head,
well
what I
and
remembered was my kind of age group at my group at that age, and what we were doing, and the commitment that we had, and the setup was really different. So I think in my head, that's what I imagined it was going to be. What
yeah,
I had was very different. However, when you provided them the opportunities and set some standards and some expectation around what you were there to do and try to achieve,
yeah,
as well as have fun with it. I think creating that space, I then ended up getting an environment that I was really happy with a group that were really committed to not just the work that we did together, but some extras that I put for them.
yeah,
And that group, we stayed together for a number of years. They ended up, playing different representative teams, National League players. So it was a starting point for me, and it was just about, I think, setting some real expectation, or it was kind of providing them with some opportunity
yeah,
to do things differently, I think.
yeah. Fantastic. Eddie, if we jump over to you, what really stood out just before, and I'll ask you how you got into coaching, but from your experience being coached, what were two or three really key values that you took into with your coaching that stood out? One's the feedback and the positive reinforcement. Were there other standards that really stood out to you?
Oh, even as I said, I was lucky enough to go into a really high level club program right from the beginning when I entered. And being a goalkeeper, you're right in the thick of kind of every part of training. And so um, for me, what really stood out was the amount of work that you needed to do, and what you needed to do, as you've already kind of surmised from both me and Bec, in the amount that you need to do on your own. You need to do extra to kind of get better, and the willingness of those really high performing athletes around me at the time who had done that and were continuing to do that was a real lesson for me that I took with me all the way through. And I was always noticing how hard people were playing in games and how fast they were moving, and all the different skill aspects that I could see came down to putting more effort in. So that certainly stood out. Yeah, the encouragement was important. I mean, Bec and I have had interesting conversations over the last year about things that we learned from the coaches who coached us, some, not all,
Yes.
that we chose not to do when we became coaches. And I think that can sometimes be as important as the things that you do pick up from good coaches.
Yes.
One that stands out for me, and I know I'm sort of jumping ahead, but
no, please do.
I was lucky enough to step into, I sort of came out of the Sydney Olympics, moved to Adelaide to follow my wife, or my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife, to Adelaide, and was invited to come and coach the South Australian Sports Institute program, having only had about 3 months worth of school coaching behind me.
Wow.
And I kind of went, oh, okay, I'm here. I'll give it a crack. And it was a good environment to be in, but it was super challenging. And I say to people that I feel like for the first 2 years at least, I was underwater. Like I was kicking my legs as hard as I could, but I was underwater. Like,
yeah,
I didn't know what I was doing, but I had people around me who were willing to help, and I was happy to ask questions, and I kind of developed, and I had quite a few experienced people within that program, which was a senior program, people who were already in Australian B teams and Australian junior teams, etc. So some experienced people.
Yeah.
But one thing that stood out
was sorry, Eddie. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, go on.
One point that really stood out to me then is you felt you were sometimes overwhelmed, but you're willing to ask questions and learn. Did you think that that's really important as a coach in general, that willingness to ask and seek feedback without defense? It's a real skill.
Oh, look, I had to. There was kind of no other way, and I relied on my athletes to help me write programs, because I didn't have a swimming background. So I relied on my athletes to help me to formulate, and my physiologist. I mean, I had great people around me, because at an institute program, you have great support staff. And so I was constantly asking questions and what should we do here? And the athletes were kind of helping me write different fitness kind of level programs. And I could certainly organise the goalkeepers program, but the field players not so much. And so slowly I was gaining a bit of knowledge in terms of that. But I sort of saw myself always as trying to learn the game more and more. Like I never felt like I really had a complete grasp of it as a player. And even as a coach now, there's constantly things that I'm learning or seeing differently or revisiting, because I kind of think, do I really know that?
Yeah.
And so, asking questions and having those key people around me was super important.
Did you have a mentor or a guide at that stage, or did you seek one out at a certain stage of your career as a sounding board?
I mean, the head coach of the women's program at the time kind of took me in as the goalkeeping coach for the Stingers, and we had quite a few conversations about water polo based things, and I took a lot of the lead on obviously how I was coaching the women back in Adelaide, based on what he was doing and the way he was trying to structure the game and the way the philosophies he had. But I always sat in an office with other coaches.
Yeah.
and just conversations would come up. Someone would come off the phone and you'd overhear a conversation and you'd start having a chat about, oh, I heard you say this. And then you just have a, 45-minute chat about some part of coaching.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to sit across from a guy who was an assistant coach with Rick Charlesworth with the Hockey Roos.
Yes.
And he
Yeah,
was
great
quite a
bunch.
senior coach at that point. And we had some great conversations. He was, I wouldn't say loose, but he'd been through so much
Yeah.
that not much structure really meant anything to him anymore. It just became, he said to me once, the most important thing is that you take some hockey balls with you to training. I'm like,
That is a classic.
well, that's obvious, but it's
Yeah.
not. It's like
Yes.
all you need is balls because they'll bring their sticks, and we'll find somewhere to hit a ball around, and we'll be able to train. Like we'll be able to do whatever we need to do. So he was amazing at that point in time. It really opened up my eyes to different ways of looking because I sort of had this real. I need to be super structured. I need to have lots of work content. That was the way I trained myself, and then and build that into the program and really progress it over time and look at loading and all that physiology-based stuff. But he was very much just the art of it, like the art of putting things together and playing little games. And, hockey, I think, was ahead of its time in terms of skill acquisition, which then water polo came into, which the national women's program was doing. And I loved that. I just thought, oh, this is the best thing ever. And so we were doing lots of that, and that made training more fun and engaging. And yeah, over time, it just kind of grew and grew.
What do you wish, and we'll jump back over to you, Beck, in a sec. What do you wish that you had known when you first started your coaching? Looking back in hindsight, it's always 2020, but we can naturally go to if you're a goalkeeper or a defensive player in whatever sport, you can be naturally drawn to those sorts of skills or development. Were there things that you wish you'd known more about when you first started coaching that you'd like to share?
I think it's for me it was when I was still quite young, so I'm saying 15, 16, I was somehow connected in with the Victorian Institute of Sport and sat down with a physiologist there, and actually I started coaching myself, maybe more, I was 17, 18.
Yeah.
And I actually wrote my own program. So I was already coaching myself through that.
Yeah.
And I think I kind of came into, because I hadn't had a lot of time dealing with different groups of people, I came into my SASI coaching role, coaching the program like I was coaching myself.
Yes.
And so what I would have liked to have was a little bit more experience to go, I actually have to do this differently for different people.
Yeah.
Or there's different ways, or I don't have to be so specific about things. I can kind of leave a bit of room for people to move into and
Just
to make
broaden
their
it out a
own way
bit.
forward. And so it was probably that level of flexibility that took me a while to kind of get my head around. But as I said, I had lots of support around me and lots of trust from the organisation that kind of gave me the opportunity
Which is fantastic.
to grow into that. Yeah.
Create that safe environment. Thank you.
Yeah.
Beck, we'll jump back over to you, and there's a couple of questions that people have been very patient to wait till we get back to you, Glenn. I'll just hand over.
Yep, Beck, first question is the way you coached when you initially started, the perspective you had on coaching, has that changed, and to what extent has it changed, and how has it changed?
I think when I first started, it was definitely pool focused first, as in skills, tactics, physical, and then everything will fall into place. Where now I still know that that's all kind of really important, but to create a team, there's a lot of work out of the pool. And I think the work that we do on the team and on our reasons for playing and I guess the why behind everything, the why behind people playing and what we're trying to achieve to try and get that all. We don't have to be the same, but to have a common goal. And I think that the out of the pool stuff that actually drives it in the pool standards, because I think when I start, well, most people when they start, they don't have the time or capacity to do all of that. So you just think we need more and more and more and more time in the pool. But sometimes just that little bit of a tweak to your training to spend a bit of time on the team and actually figuring out, no matter what age, like what makes this group tick, what are we trying to achieve? Because I think we just assume, and when I started, I assume why everyone wants to be there and why they all play and that they all love it the same way I do. And you forget that everyone's from different kind of environments and their reasons for being there are different. So I suppose my biggest shift is to care more for that, and that still doesn't take away from the work we do in the pool, but it actually drives all the work we do in the pool. So it's probably a people first, kind of to Eddie's point around the individualization of players within a team environment. That's changed the most.
Thank you. That question was from Ido. The second question from Libby is, you said that the NSWIS coaches had the most impact on you initially. So you set a goal to become an NSWIS coach. At what stage did you set sights on becoming the national team coach?
Yeah, I mean, I had coaches before the N-Swiss coach that had probably the biggest impact on me, but at the time that probably had the biggest impact on my switch to senior national water polo. So I think that was just a dream. I never really thought that was going to come true. So to similar to the national role, that was I don't think I ever got in coaching for that reason. And I was quite happy doing the role that I was doing. I really like my favorite job until this point was my N-Swiss role, and I loved that so much because I felt like I could have an impact on the players before they went into the national program or while they were in the national program, and it's where I could work individually with people in a team environment. I think it's where I learnt to become a coach, that next level. While I was doing that, I didn't have sights on the national role, and as I suppose I got more experience and I was the assistant coach, people talked to me about it, but it was like one of those things for me. If the right opportunity presents at the right time, I just want to make sure that I'm ready to step in, because I think as we talk to players about this, it's the same thing as a coach. Like you need to be ready if the moment's there to say yes or to step in. And so yeah, I think maybe I was ready when the opportunity presented. I don't know about before that.
Thanks, Bec, and thanks, Damien.
No, you're welcome. Bec, going from athlete to high performance standards to standards you have for yourself and doing the extra things and the expectations around that, and then stepping into coaching, even at a junior level, was that something you had to learn to temper in yourself? With people say I'm working hard, and you can, well, no, you're not. You're not doing extra things, but you want to keep that fun element. Was that a challenge for you when you first started coaching?
Yeah, it definitely is. You always want athletes to work harder. You want them to, push, do more, and do all the extras. You want everyone to be at the elite level, even when they're not. And I think
Yeah.
that's just natural in a coach that you want more, more, more. Oh, some of my background, and I wasn't a great PT, but I did a little bit of it while I was playing. And I think the biggest thing I learned in that is that you can't necessarily change everyone. You can just help them, because that was an environment where people were coming in for an hour a day, a couple of times a week, and they wanted to change all these things in their life. But what I learned there is you can only have an impact and you can try and help them understand why they do things, but what else they can do outside of there. So I think that period of time for me, even though it wasn't water polo coaching, I learned a lot about people and I learned a lot about what they're willing to do. And
Yes.
that gave me a really good insight I suppose into athletes as well. So when I did get into coaching, I knew not everyone thought the same, but I think when they're young enough and they're in the environment, you can influence, but you
Yep.
can't force them. At the end of the day, it needs to be their choice. So as a player, when I was younger, I didn't want to do what you told me to do. I wanted to do it once I figured out it was going to be good for me.
Yeah.
So helping them understand the why.
Putting you on the pathway to,
Yeah,
okay,
giving
this
them
is going to be a
choice and
benefit.
ownership
Yeah.
of I
Yeah.
suppose, of their decisions, but also if they did the work, often the results were there. And I
Yeah.
think that's the thing, is that it doesn't guarantee you anything, but it just means you can walk away kind of without regrets at the end. Sorry, that's
Yeah.
my dog going in my doggy door.
Oh, yeah. So the
Um,
finger pointing was never, it was a bit of an old school thing, but you must, you will, it didn't motivate you at all. So you took that away, getting the right push and pull of boundaries and standards, but how do I motivate?
yeah, how do you motivate them and how do you get them to understand the why behind it? Because I think if you know why you're doing it, then most people are willing to step in and have a
Yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah.
If they just think it's for no purpose, it's really hard to turn up and do something every day.
What about the balance of coaching? And we'll jump back to you, Eddie. It's a challenge for people who are thinking in it. How am I going to fit it in? How am I going to do it? Was that a crossroad for you? of making the decision to get into the coaching more and more, of balancing things in life, and how did you manage your journey through that?
Is this for me or Bec?
No, sorry, Bec, and then we'll jump across to you, Eddie,
Sorry, I
because
thought it was for you, Eddie.
I want to jump in from the senior coach's assistant
Yeah.
as well, which is a really important one. So, Bec, yeah, was that a challenge for you?
Sorry, so that was around the trying to
The
fit in.
challenge of balance is, well, when you first get into it, you're busy with life, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
as you get better and better, well, some things are going to give or push you. Was that a challenge for you, and how did you get through that?
Definitely. It was, as most junior coach roles are, volunteer work, and it was on the side. The good thing was that I loved it
Yeah,
and that I wanted to keep doing it. But I think every time I'd go away to a tournament, I'd come back and I'd be like, I love this. I'm going to give up everything, even if I have no money, and,
yeah,
tell myself the dream. But then reality hits and I'm doing all the hours of normal work plus the coaching on the side and realizing I can't keep my eyes open. But I think it was just this roller coaster of push and pull of keep doing it, you love it, until I needed to, I suppose, make some decisions. And
yeah,
but I also got presented because of those, like I said before, if you do the work and you're ready, if
yeah,
opportunities present, you can. And some opportunities were presented where they were, whether it was a project role or a part-time role, and I jumped at those.
yeah,
And I suppose there's periods of time where I was also like, now what? Like I can't do just part-time forever. So trying to make it all work and decide, is it what I want to do? Is it not
yeah,
what I want to do?
yeah,
So I've been through all of that and, still go through all of that. It's a really tough job, but it was definitely hard, and it was always going back to why I was doing it, because
yeah.
if I loved
The
it,
rewards of being
yeah,
involved, but yeah,
yeah,
absolutely fantastic. Eddie, we jump across to you. It's a really unique thing to be the head coach and an assistant coach. But is the role of assistant coach a good pathway in if you're considering it? You haven't quite got the pressure, but it's a very different role. How have you found assistant coaching?
Well, how I got into it maybe is the first part. Again, because I was a goalkeeper as a national athlete, I came into the women's program as a goalkeeping coach, and then had a time where I was both men's and women's senior program goalkeeper coach. So that then generally leads quite easily into being an assistant coach, because most teams would have a coach who is dedicated, or who looks after the goalkeepers among other roles, because it's such a critical role for a team.
Yep.
And so for me, I was an assistant coach. I've been an assistant coach more often than I've been a head coach. When I was junior national coach, still I had assistant coaches who could fill other roles or could look at other parts of the game and work with other individuals on the team at a skill level that I couldn't. But then I'd always be working with the goalkeepers. So for me, look, the assistant coaching role I think suits me. But the fact that I've had some experience as a head coach, I kind of know the pressures that are there, and I know the things that, well, the many things that can kind of weigh you down or get stuck in your head, or kind of decrease brain power or energy levels, etc., etc. So I've always seen my role as, and the general assistant coaching role is to kind of try to take some of that pressure away from the head coach.
Yep.
Do a really good job with the people that you're working with, or analyzing a certain part of the game, which is the way we kind of run our team, and making sure that's done really well, because part of that is your own satisfaction in trying to do something at an excellent level, but also that supporting role for all the other people that you're working with, because everyone's under the pump, everyone's time poor, things need to be done at time critical kind of periods, and the head coach has to try to pull it all together, apart from all of that. So look, I think it is an absolutely critical role. I mean, without the right assistant coaches, I think a head coach can struggle and a team can
Yep.
struggle. And with the right ones, it can really work well. And I've worked with some excellent assistant coaches myself over time, and we've had great results. And it hasn't always been easy. There's been challenges, and there's been some interesting conversations along the way, and trying to find that kind of commonality.
Yes.
But if you can work your way through that, then you can have a great amount of output from those 2 or 3 coaches rather than just the one.
Would you consider it a good pathway in for some people considering coaching as well, that you get to sit next to the head coach and understand the pressures and have a good look if you want to do it? And it is a challenging role, assistant coach, because you need to give information at times and it can be considered and gone no. And you need to park your ego in those circumstances. So is it a good pathway in as well? And parking your ego is really important.
Look, very much. I think the ability to develop a relationship with someone in that high energy, high stress, sometimes environment is a challenge, and is something that you don't necessarily do with any other part of your life. So that's kind of a cool thing, that you can spend time with that person or those people in that environment and kind of see different parts of each other, different ways of doing things, and actually be able to integrate and work in a way that is cohesive. I mean, that's a really exciting thing, and sometimes it doesn't work so smoothly, but it's kind of that process of trying to make things happen. And then just being on the bench watching an international game in person and seeing what happens, it's chalk and cheese. It's like watching AFL on the footy compared to on the TV, apart from going to the game and actually seeing everything that's happening at the time and being able to focus on things off the ball. And you just see so much that you don't necessarily know. And if you're willing to ask questions and actually engage in good conversations, and as an assistant coach, you'll have to, because any head coach wants to discuss things with their assistants. And so you're immediately in the thick of it, and you have to be making decisions or helping make decisions. I think it's a great lead in. And look, as I say that, there are different skill sets. And so some people will never move from assistant to head coach.
Yep.
I'm probably a pretty good example of that, but I'm happy being an assistant coach and being able to assist or facilitate, the coach doing the best job that they can do. And I feel like that's a nice role to have as well.
Absolutely. Glenn, you had a few questions there for both Eddie and Bec.
You both raised that there's coaching techniques that you've when you've been a player and also an assistant coach that your head coaches have pursued. What are some of those coaching techniques that you've chosen not to progress in your own role? If we go with you first, Eddie.
Well, one that was really clear, I remember being, maybe still first, maybe started the second year of my SASI coaching job. And I just caught myself, it was a shooting drill, basic shooting drill, boys sitting around, cross-passing, shooting, goalkeeper, whatever. And I was making comment on every shot that missed, every one of them. And if people scored, I said nothing. And it just somehow it dawned on me. I just went, that's what coaches and people used to do to me. I used to do to people when I was in goals and people were shooting. They would always focus on the negative, like you need to do better, you need to hit the corner, you need to throw that better, you need to pitch it shorter or longer, or da-da-da. And I kind of went, what if I actually spun it around and I said nothing if they shot a bad shot? And over time, just be really encouraging of what I saw people doing better. And at that point, I made the switch and I never went back. And I think that actually made a big difference. I mean, it's a silly thing, but it was that's what I took with me into that environment from having had coaches that were so specific about what they wanted and were always picking on faults and hoping that people will get better despite that. And I thought, well, yeah, if I'm just more positive about and really encouraging people. So even now, if I see someone trying something that they can't necessarily do, and this is even at the Stingers level, I'll give a yell across the pool and go, hey, that was great. You tried that, try that again, kind of thing. And you can kind of see how that little bit of encouragement can just go a really long way. So that's a big shift that I feel I made really early on, transferring from being an athlete under really strict coaches and really old-fashioned, like, hammer the players type coaches, into being the type of coach that I wanted to be, and then getting better out of the athletes through that.
Bec?
I would be really similar in just the communication and the mostly around the communication piece. I think as a coach, what I saw growing up, not just my own coaches, but coaching in general, was angry people on the side of the pool, abusing referees, abusing players, and then expecting athletes to perform. And it just didn't sit well with me. That's not naturally who I am. So in coaching, that actually took me a while to reconcile, like, was I able to ever be a coach if I didn't behave like that? And it took me, I suppose, I mean, I have seen Eddie, and Eddie's been someone for me that I've always seen as a coach that I'd like to be like. His demeanor on the side of the pool, how he coached in our environment when I was an athlete, and also when I watched him coaching the Jets and things like that. For me, that's always been someone that has done it differently. And for myself, it was around, well, how can you do things differently and still prove that you can get results? It was a bit of a personal challenge. But it really was around that communication piece and around the environment being really challenging but safe. And I wanted to create that, and that required some discipline to not jump in and to not behave differently to how I said I was going to. So even now we talk about our behaviors and our standards, and then when you're frustrated, when you're angry, or things are going on, it's really easy to want to switch. But to commit to behaving a certain way day in, day out builds trust in athletes, or for the athletes in us, and trust for the other coaches as well, in that they are in a safe environment, because they might make mistakes and we might have hard conversations, but they're done with the best intention. So we talk in a real positive way. We talk in a forward-thinking way. We try not to sit in the past too much. We spend a lot of time on how we want to communicate, and I think that's been the biggest thing for me that have taken away as well, is trying to create a different type of environment that proves you can still be successful.
Thanks, Bec. Well, I've got you. What coaching courses, qualifications, whether they be in water polo or other qualifications, have you seen necessary to take on to support your coaching?
I think the biggest things that I would say have had the most impact are, they're not necessarily degrees, but they're programs, not necessarily like this one where it's a chat, but like programs on self-development, programs on figuring out who you are, what your leadership style is, what your personality is, how you respond under pressure. So I've done some leadership courses. I've done a lot of coach development, but in the soft skills. And I think for me, that has allowed me to kind of be better at transferring the water polo technical tactical coaching skills, because if I really think about it, and I'm not saying my tech tac or whatever is the best ever, but if I look at everyone having, that's the even playing field, there's a certain level of knowledge there. I think the gap is in how we can communicate it and how we can get the most out of our athletes with the knowledge that we have. So I think for me, those courses around my own self-development and my own, one of the biggest ones I did was a mental performance coaching program, which was about creating a psychologically safe environment through the environment that we have, but also through my own behaviors and, the assessment around that and the learnings that I took from that. So yeah, I'd say all the coaching courses on the soft skills.
Thanks, Bec. Eddie, can I ask the same question?
When I first jumped into coaching, there was still kind of a coursework, level 1, level 2 kind of general principles, but all that sort of course, which I found good, because I had done, again, I didn't have, when I came into the institute coaching position, I hadn't done a lot of coaching prior to that. So I had a good amount of international sort of player experience, but I didn't have much coaching experience. And so I went and did all these, basic courses that taught me about physiology, etc. I did engineering through university, but I hadn't really done biology and So there was a lot for me to learn in those kind of basic areas. But knew the game, knew kind of how to work people hard. As I said, that's kind of the starting point. But as an athlete, I think probably in my last 3 years of being an athlete, I started really investigating who I was, and that whole premise of know thyself was kind of the thing that led me forward. And so I've done a lot of work on myself in different ways to try to expand the knowledge and understanding of who I am and what I'm about and how I want to act and what I want to be and who I am in truth, as opposed to how I present, and why is there a disconnect between those two, and all those sort of questions leading me down this different pathways. And I can't even say I've done a lot of coursework around that, or done lots of courses. It's just been reading and finding books and following the rabbit hole a little bit one way, and then having a look another way, and just trying to synthesize all the different aspects of that. And so and when I look at the coaching group that we've now got around the Stingers, I feel like the three of us have done that work in different ways, and I think we know ourselves really well, and so we can actually present our authentic selves to the group and to each other pretty much all the time, and just be really clear and open and honest with all that, because we know ourselves. And so I would say, I mean, that's taken a number of years. I'm not young, but if you can commit to, I think, knowing yourself better, then you can be a better coach, because then you can relate yourself to others more clearly and more directly, and they can actually see who you are as a coach. And I think that's really important. If you're kind of trying to make up something that you think should be a coach, that doesn't really work for very long, because people see through that. So the best way is to actually be your authentic self with the people in front of you, and go, well, this is how I'm going to coach, and do the best you can with that. And some people aren't going to like it, but that's kind of the way it is. But people generally tend to gravitate to someone, I believe, who is a coach who is really authentic about who they are and how they approach things.
A couple of others from the audience. While I've got you, Eddie, as a male, what are some of the different challenges that you believe female coaches have in the high performance environment?
Look, it's been pretty clear over many decades that opportunity has been missing right from the beginning levels. And so now there's a much stronger push and a much greater an awareness of that, and then opportunity being created, but also allowed, more allowed, and women coaches being more encouraged to be in that space. And so, there was hardly any, I don't think, when I first started coaching females in the early 2000s, and then slowly over time we've been having more coaches coming back in who have been national team players and who are willing to kind of coach in that area, which has been amazing. And even my experience, having been an assistant coach with a male coach of the Stingers, and now with a female head coach, like, it's chalk and cheese. It's a completely different way of doing things, and it's such a more connected and open and flexible type of way, and a more encouraging one for people to actually have input into the program, as opposed to it being a very, this is the way I'm doing it, and everyone else just has to hang around the edges and hold on for dear life. So look, for female coaches, the advantage they have, however, is that they can potentially, be able to connect with female athletes a lot more personally, based on the journey that they've had as players going into coaches that I can't, right? I can kind of share certain stories and certain things and the ways I've done things and the way I've thought about things, but it's not specific to being a female in the sport, potentially in a training with a group that's mostly males, or whatever that issue might be. So I suppose the other way of looking at it, I don't want to overtake the whole conversation, but now I'm, at the moment, my other role is as general manager of Water Polo South Australia. I'm happy to say we've had four or five female coaches coming through over the last couple of years, which is really exciting. That there are these females who want to, give back to the sport, and they're learning good skills along the way, and they're able to connect with the females, or the female athletes, really quite nicely. And one of our female coaches is coaching boys who are only 2 or 3 years younger as well. So that's a great ability, and we're trying to encourage that to try to get themselves out there and test their skills and kind of learn as they go.
Thanks, Damien. We've got a couple more questions, but we'll leave those when we open the room up later on.
Yeah. Now, final question for Bec, I suppose, because it's the hour's up already. It's gone very, very quick. The softer skills that you touched on, they're really important. Emotional intelligence is probably the number one thing that I've come out in all my work of understanding. But coaching at higher levels, you've got to have the ability to have lean into the difficult conversations. There's going to be people that miss out on squads, miss out on games, or need to improve on things. How did you improve or understand those skills, and how do you lean into those conversations to give required feedback that might be difficult, but to help the athlete keep coming back and working hard? It's a very important skill for a coach not to avoid that.
Yeah, I think I've had those meetings myself and had them done a number of different ways when I was playing, and sometimes they didn't feel truthful, and sometimes they just felt like telling me the same thing over and over. I guess the thing I've learned is that you can be kind, but you can be honest, and that can be kind as well. And sometimes the hard truth is actually the kindest thing you can do and say to people. Most athletes want the real versions, and I've got athletes who ask for that all the time. They want
Mm.
the truth, and so to provide them with that in the kindest way possible. I think when it comes to things like selection, it's a really difficult time for everyone, for players, for coaches.
Very vulnerable.
It's not a fun time, and it's
No,
it's but it's part of high performance.
of
That's
course.
the
Yeah.
actual choice you make when you choose to play the sport, is to
Yeah.
step into something where selection is a part of it.
We're being judged, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
but to have those conversations, knowing that they're going to hurt, and that people don't want to hear what they what you have to say, but
Yeah.
actually you've got to have them. And yeah, I suppose to be kind in the process. It's a really difficult time, but how can you do it in the kindest way possible?
Yeah.
That still gives the information that's required. So I think it's around that. It's always finding how can you deliver difficult messages
Yeah.
in an appropriate way.
But you
At the
touched on it
same
well.
time,
So
yeah,
as a coach, you're saying you need to have those conversations. Don't avoid them,
yeah.
because it actually will just compound and blow up in the end. So you've really went into that throughout your coaching to sit down and have the tough chat. But
Yeah, I mean, we have daily conversations with players around the pool. There's always something going on with athletes, so you're continuously having those. But then there's also selection time, which comes with a feedback piece to it around non-selection, and we try and do that in a more structured way, because it is an emotional time, and we try and keep a little bit of that out of that.
yeah,
For the short term, and then have those bigger conversations. So there's process around it as well to try and support the athletes, the coaches, and all the people involved. But we're having, even when it doesn't come to selection, we're having difficult conversations with people every day, because we're dealing with people who are going through real life things. And,
yeah,
as coaches, how we talk to each other, we're having real conversations about real life things. So I think that it's just a reality, and you can choose to, ignore it or choose to step in. And what we've found is by, I think to Eddie's point again, by being our authentic selves in this space, and being honest about who we are and those difficult things for us as well, and just kind of creating that space where we all trust each other. And then when those conversations come, the majority of the time they may not like them, but they accept them. The same way as coaches to each other, when we don't, we have to have difficult conversations around things as well. So yeah, it's a part of it, and rather than avoid it, I think it's about stepping in and being prepared, and doing it in the kindest way.
absolutely. Well, honesty
Yeah.
builds and develops trust over time. So if you are, and sometimes it is that truth that you're going to miss out, or these skills are letting you down, and you work on them. But those people, if they take it in that positive way, come back and come back, and they can be some of your best players in the end. That you've just seen them work on those hard skills. They've got that resilience, the dedication, commitment, all doing the harder things that you've talked about. Glenn, that's over time. So thank you formally. We'll wrap up. Thank you so much, Beck and Eddie. It's unbelievable. I feel like we've only scratched the surface, but you've been unbelievable to have a conversation with. Thank you so much on behalf of the audience, Water Polo New South Wales, for making yourselves available. It was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks,
I'd like
team.
to also thank Eddie and Beck. When we sat down last month to look at when we could schedule all the coaches, the 23rd of June was the only day that Eddie and Beck were available due to their national team commitments and camps and everything else they're doing in their lives. So thanks very much for giving up an hour of your valuable time tonight.
Yeah, it's amazing.
What we'd like to do is just to open up I'll stop the recording now.